A test of character. The sun beat down relentlessly over Scottsdale, Arizona, casting shimmering waves of heat across the pristine blacktop outside Elite Motors. This luxury car dealership was a beacon of opulence, with its state-of-the-art architecture and a fleet of exotic vehicles that gleamed under the Arizona sun. From the latest Italian sports cars to German engineering marvels, each vehicle was a testament to excess and ambition. Inside an old, nondescript SUV parked just outside, Marcus Harper took a moment to steady his breath. His fingers drummed lightly against the steering wheel, the rhythm echoing the steady determination coursing through him. His car, a vehicle with peeling paint and a sagging bumper, stood in stark contrast to the sleek Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Aston Martins that graced the dealership's showroom floor. For many, it would be an entry marked with intimidation or even embarrassment. For Marcus, it was the perfect entrance. Dressed in a plain gray hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days, Marcus looked like an ordinary man running errands, not someone stepping into one of the most exclusive car dealerships in the Southwest. But that was exactly what he intended. Today wasn't about appearances. It was about uncovering the truth about the culture that lay beneath the glossy facade of Elite Motors, the dealership he had recently acquired as part of his burgeoning business portfolio. Marcus's philosophy as a businessman had always been simple: people first. He believed that a business was only as strong as its culture, and its culture was only as strong as its people. Yet reports about Elite Motors had reached his desk, and they weren't favorable. Stories of discrimination, snobbery, and employees valuing customers based solely on appearances painted a troubling picture. Today, Marcus intended to test those rumors himself. Entering the lion's den. Stepping out of his SUV, Marcus adjusted his hoodie against the sweltering heat, his heart steady as he approached the gleaming glass doors of the dealership. Inside, the showroom was every bit as immaculate as he'd expected. Polished marble floors reflected the pristine vehicles on display, while recessed lighting highlighted their every curve and detail. The scent of new leather hung faintly in the air, mingling with a soft, classical tune playing over hidden speakers. The employees stationed at the reception desk were engrossed in animated conversation, their laughter filling the otherwise serene space. Marcus's entry interrupted their banter. The subtle shift in their demeanor was immediate. Glances were exchanged, quick and assessing, their initial expressions betraying a judgment based entirely on his attire. The bright, welcoming smiles they had worn seconds earlier dimmed into polite, reserved nods. Marcus felt the weight of their skepticism but ignored it. He wasn't here for pleasantries. His eyes scanned the room, pausing momentarily on a sleek red sports car stationed in the center of the showroom. He stepped forward, his sneakers squeaking faintly against the pristine floor, drawing even more attention to himself. The queen of the showroom. From the far side of the room, Catherine Richards, the showroom manager, observed him with hawk-like precision. Dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit, her heels clicked sharply against the marble as she made her way toward him. Her presence was commanding, every step, every movement exuding authority. A clipboard in hand completed the image of a woman who lived and breathed control. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice crisp and professional, but carrying an undertone of cool skepticism. Her smile was thin, as though measured to prevent overexertion. "I'm Catherine, the manager here. How can I assist you?" Marcus turned toward her, his expression neutral. "Just looking around," he replied simply, his voice calm and steady. Catherine's gaze flickered down to his attire before snapping back to his face, the hint of a frown tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Of course," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We have some truly exceptional models, but many of them are reserved for pre-qualified buyers. If you'd like, I can direct you to our pre-owned section." Her words were polite enough, but the implication was clear. Marcus didn't fit the profile of someone capable of affording the vehicles around them. Her attempt to disguise her judgment under a veneer of professionalism wasn't lost on him. "I appreciate that," Marcus said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But I'm more interested in these models. I'd like to take a closer look. Catherine's polite mask slipped ever so slightly, a flicker of irritation flashing in her eyes. Of course, she repeated, her tone tighter now. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Silent observations. As Marcus wandered through the showroom, he felt the weight of Catherine's gaze following him, her scrutiny like a laser fixed on his every move. Employees whispered to one another in hushed tones, their curiosity and skepticism palpable. Marcus could sense their unspoken thoughts. What's he doing here? Why bother with him? At one point, Marcus stopped in front of a sleek black coupe, his fingers brushing the edge of its hood. The vehicle was a marvel of engineering, every line and contour exuding power and elegance. As he admired it, he couldn't help but overhear Catherine's voice behind him. "Daniel," she said in a low, firm tone to a younger employee, nodding discreetly in Marcus's direction. "Keep an eye on him. I don't want anything getting scuffed." The words stung, not because they were unexpected, but because they confirmed everything he had feared about the dealership's culture. Still, Marcus remained calm, his expression betraying none of the frustration building inside him. He had seen enough to know that the problems at Elite Motors ran deeper than just one person. Another test arrives. As Marcus continued to explore the showroom, the glass doors opened once again, and another customer entered. He was older, dressed even more casually than Marcus, in a faded polo shirt and worn khakis. His scuffed running shoes and weathered face suggested someone who spent more time working outdoors than indulging in luxury. Catherine's reaction was instantaneous. Her sharp gaze landed on the man, and her expression shifted into one of complete indifference. She leaned toward Daniel again, muttering instructions before turning away without so much as a greeting. The man, seemingly unfazed, approached one of the SUVs near the entrance and began inspecting it. "I heard this model is great," he said to Daniel, who had reluctantly approached him. "I'd like to ask about placing an order." Daniel hesitated, glancing nervously at Catherine, who offered no assistance. "I'm not sure," he stammered, his discomfort obvious. "You might need to speak with someone else about that." From across the room, Marcus observed the exchange, his jaw tightening. The older man's patience was admirable, but Catherine's blatant disregard was inexcusable. The moment of truth. Finally, Marcus decided he had seen enough. He approached the silver coupe once more, running his hand over its sleek surface as Catherine's eyes locked onto him like a hawk spotting prey. "Catherine," he called out, his voice calm but commanding. She turned toward him, her expression stiff. "Yes," she replied, her tone clipped. "Why do you think I'm not qualified to buy a car here?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but laced with quiet authority. Catherine's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected question, but she quickly recovered. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, her smile now strained. Marcus stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "From the moment I walked in, you judged me. You assumed I didn't belong here based on how I look. I'd like to know why." The silence in the showroom was deafening as Catherine stared at him, her composure cracking under the weight of his words. Around them, employees and customers alike watched in stunned silence, the atmosphere heavy with tension. But Marcus wasn't done. "And while we're at it," he continued, his voice growing sharper, "I think I'd like to meet the owner. Can you arrange that for me?" Catherine blinked, a flicker of panic crossing her face. "The owner doesn't usually meet with customers," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "If you'd like, I can arrange for a consultant to assist you." "No need," Marcus interrupted, his calm smile returning. "The owner is already here." Catherine's face drained of color as Marcus's words sank in. Around them, the showroom fell into a stunned silence. This was just the beginning of a lesson Catherine, and the dealership, would never forget. Unmasking authority. The air in the Elite Motors showroom hung heavy with shock. Marcus Harper stood at the center of the opulent space, his calm demeanor in stark contrast to the growing panic in Catherine's expression. The manager's icy professionalism had melted into disbelief, her usually sharp gaze now clouded with uncertainty. Around them, whispers rippled like an undercurrent among the staff, and the few customers scattered throughout the dealership. Marcus let the moment linger, his calm confidence unshaken. He could feel every eye in the room locked onto him, the collective tension so palpable it seemed to weigh down the very air. The owner, Catherine, finally managed, her voice a brittle echo of its former authority. Her clipboard, a symbol of her control, now seemed little more than a flimsy prop in her hands. "What do you mean?" Marcus took a measured step forward, his hands still tucked casually into the pockets of his worn hoodie. "I mean exactly what I said," he replied, his voice steady. "I'm Marcus Harper, the new owner of Elite Motors, and I think we need to have a conversation." Catherine's eyes darted around the room as though searching for support, but none came. The other employees remained frozen, their shock mirroring her own. The older man who had entered earlier, the restaurant owner she had so casually dismissed, watched with an expression of growing intrigue. Marcus turned his gaze toward the stunned staff, allowing the weight of his presence to settle over them. "I'd like everyone to gather here," he announced, his tone firm but not unkind. "It seems we have some important things to address." The gathering storm. The employees hesitated, exchanging nervous glances before slowly assembling around Marcus. Catherine remained rooted in place, her expression alternating between defiance and uncertainty. She appeared to struggle with the reality unfolding before her, clinging desperately to the remnants of her authority. "Now," Marcus began, his voice carrying an unmistakable command. "I didn't come here to make anyone uncomfortable, but I also didn't come here to be disrespected. Before we move forward, let me explain why I'm standing here today." The staff stood in uneasy silence as Marcus's words sank in. He paused, scanning their faces. Some were tense with worry, while others bore expressions of curiosity, perhaps even hope. "I bought this dealership not because it's profitable," Marcus continued, his gaze steady, "but because I see potential here. Potential not just in the cars we sell, but in the people who work here and the customers who walk through these doors. This place should be a symbol of excellence, not just in luxury vehicles, but in the way we treat people." He let his words hang in the air before continuing. "But what I've seen today doesn't reflect that. Instead of respect and inclusivity, I've seen judgment, dismissiveness, prejudice, and that's not a culture I can allow to exist in my business." Catherine's defense. Catherine finally found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Mr. Harper," she began, her tone brittle, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We pride ourselves on our professionalism and high standards. If anything you've seen today fell short, I assure you it's an anomaly." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "An anomaly," he repeated, his tone calm but piercing. "Tell me, Catherine, do you think it's professional to judge a customer based on their appearance? To assume their worth based on what they wear or what they drive?" Catherine hesitated, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. I didn't mean to judge," she stammered. "I was only trying to ensure that our resources were directed efficiently." "Efficiently," Marcus echoed, his voice sharpening slightly. "By steering customers who don't look the part toward the pre-owned section. By dismissing a man who was ready to buy a luxury SUV because you assumed he couldn't afford it." Catherine's face flushed, and she struggled for a response. "It wasn't my intention to." "It's not about intention," Marcus interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "It's about action. And your actions reflect a bias that has no place in this dealership, or any business, for that matter." A lesson in leadership. Marcus turned to address the entire staff, his voice rising with conviction. "Let me make one thing clear. This dealership is not just about selling cars. It's about creating an experience, a space where every customer feels valued, regardless of how they look or what they drive. Luxury isn't just about the product. It's about the service, the respect, and the dignity we extend to everyone who walks through these doors. The employees listened intently, their expressions shifting from apprehension to reflection. Even Catherine, though visibly unsettled, seemed to absorb the weight of his words. To build that kind of culture, Marcus continued, we need to start with accountability. And that begins today. He turned his gaze back to Catherine, who stiffened under his scrutiny. Catherine, as the manager of this showroom, you've been entrusted with setting the tone for how this business operates. But what I've seen today tells me that something has gone very wrong. Catherine opened her mouth to respond, but Marcus held up a hand to stop her. I'm not here to fire you, he said, his tone softening slightly. But I am here to hold you accountable. You've been in this role long enough to know better. So now, I'm giving you the chance to prove that you can lead this team in the right direction. An unexpected ally. Before Catherine could respond, the older man who had been observing the scene stepped forward. His sun-weathered face bore a thoughtful expression, and his voice was calm but resolute. Mr. Harper, he said, addressing Marcus, if I may. Marcus nodded, gesturing for the man to speak. I've been coming to this dealership for years, the man began, his gaze sweeping across the room. And I've seen what you're talking about. The way some people are treated differently, the assumptions that are made. It's not right. But I'll tell you this, what you're doing here today, calling it out and addressing it head-on, is exactly what this place needs. The man turned to Catherine, his expression kind but firm. I don't know you personally, he said, but I do know that everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow. If you're willing to take this as an opportunity to do better, I think you could make a real difference here. Catherine's eyes softened, and for the first time, her posture relaxed slightly. She looked at Marcus, then at the older man, and finally nodded. I understand, she said quietly, and I'll do my best to prove that I'm worthy of this role. The beginning of change. Marcus studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable, before giving a small nod. Good, he said simply, because this isn't just about you, Catherine. It's about everyone in this room. Each of you has a role to play in creating the kind of dealership we can all be proud of. He turned to the rest of the staff, his gaze sweeping across their faces. This is a fresh start for all of us. I'm not interested in holding grudges or pointing fingers. What I am interested in is building a team that values integrity, respect, and excellence, not just in the cars we sell, but in the way we treat one another. The employees nodded slowly, their initial skepticism giving way to a sense of cautious optimism. Marcus could see the spark of possibility beginning to ignite in their eyes. As the meeting came to a close, Marcus felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to lead by example, and to ensure that Elite Motors became a place where everyone, regardless of their background, could feel truly valued. With a final nod to the staff, Marcus turned and walked toward the door, leaving behind a showroom no longer defined by judgment, but by the promise of change. Rebuilding trust. The following day, the mood at Elite Motors was tense but expectant. Employees filtered in early, their conversations hushed as they speculated about the previous day's events. Word of Marcus Harper's unannounced visit, and his revelation as the dealership's new owner, had spread like wildfire. The shock of his identity was only rivaled by the transformative energy he had brought with him. For Catherine Richards, the once unshakable showroom manager, the day began with a mix of apprehension and determination. Marcus's words still echoed in her mind. You've been in this role long enough to know better. Prove that you can lead this team in the right direction. She had spent much of the previous night reflecting on his critique. While it had stung, she couldn't deny the truth behind his observations. Now, as she prepared for a staff meeting Marcus had called, she vowed to face the challenge head-on. A new kind of meeting. At exactly 8:30 a.m., Marcus arrived. Unlike the day before, his presence didn't carry the element of surprise, but it still commanded attention. Dressed sharply in a tailored blazer and crisp slacks, he exuded a quiet authority. His approachable demeanor, however, was a stark contrast to the intimidating image of many high-level executives. The staff gathered in the spacious conference room, a place usually reserved for strategy meetings and performance reviews. Catherine sat near the front, her clipboard and pen ready, a determined look on her face. Around her, employees shifted in their seats, some nervous, others curious. Marcus stood at the head of the room, his hands resting lightly on the table. He scanned the room before speaking, his voice steady and calm. "Thank you all for being here this morning," he began. "I know yesterday was unexpected, but I want to assure you that I didn't come here to point fingers or make anyone feel uncomfortable. I came here because I believe in this dealership and in all of you. However, belief alone isn't enough. We need to take action." He paused, allowing his words to settle. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Elite Motors. To move forward, we need to rebuild trust, not just with our customers, but with each other. And that starts with honesty. Confronting hard truths, Marcus looked directly at Catherine, who straightened in her seat. "Catherine," he said, his tone firm but not harsh, "I want to thank you for staying in this role after yesterday's events. It takes courage to face criticism and remain committed. But I also want to hear your perspective. How do you think we can address the issues we discussed?" Catherine hesitated for a moment, the weight of the room's attention pressing on her. Then she took a deep breath and spoke. "I'll admit, yesterday was a wake-up call," she began. "I've always believed I was doing what was best for the dealership, ensuring efficiency, catering to high-value clients, and maintaining a certain standard. But I see now that I let those priorities cloud my judgment." She glanced at Marcus, her voice growing steadier. "I realize now that I've made assumptions about customers and even staff that were unfair. I set a tone that wasn't welcoming. And for that, I take responsibility. I want to do better, for the team and for the reputation of this dealership." The room was silent as Catherine finished, her words carrying the weight of sincerity. Marcus nodded, a faint smile of approval on his face. "Thank you, Catherine," he said. "Acknowledging the problem is the first step. Now let's talk about solutions. Redefining customer experience." Marcus turned back to the group, addressing them all. "Here's what I want to implement immediately. First, we need to redefine how we approach customer service. Every customer, no matter how they look, deserves respect and attention. That means no more assumptions, no more profiling. If someone walks through that door, they're here for a reason, and it's our job to make them feel valued." A few employees nodded, their expressions thoughtful. Marcus continued, his voice firm. "To ensure this, we'll be introducing a new training program focused on unconscious bias, empathy, and customer engagement. It's not just about selling cars, it's about creating an experience that leaves a lasting positive impression." He paused, letting the staff absorb his words. "Second, we'll be revising our team structure. I want everyone here to feel empowered, not intimidated. Catherine, you'll be working with me directly to set a new tone of leadership, one that prioritizes mentorship and collaboration." Catherine nodded, a mix of relief and resolve on her face. "Understood, Mr. Harbert," she said. "I'm ready to take on that responsibility." Building a bridge. As the meeting progressed, Marcus opened the floor to input from the team. At first, the room was hesitant, but slowly, employees began to share their thoughts. "I think it's a great idea to focus on the customer experience," said Daniel, the young sales associate Catherine had assigned to assist the restaurant owner the day before. "But we also need to work on how we support each other as a team. Sometimes it feels like we're competing against each other instead of working together." Marcus nodded. "That's an excellent point, Daniel. A strong team culture is just as important as how we treat our customers. We'll look at ways to foster more collaboration and mutual support among the staff." Another employee, a middle-aged woman named Rosa, spoke up next. "I've been here for 10 years, and I've seen how things have changed. We've always been focused on numbers, sales targets, revenue. But I think we've lost sight of what makes this place special. The people, both the customers and us. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words carried conviction. If we can bring that focus back, I think we can make this dealership something we're all proud of. Marcus smiled warmly. Thank you, Rosa. That's exactly the vision I have for Elite Motors. And with voices like yours leading the way, I know we can achieve it. A new energy. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had started as a tense and uncertain gathering now buzzed with a sense of possibility. Employees left with a clearer understanding of their role in shaping the dealership's future and a renewed sense of purpose. Catherine, too, felt a spark of optimism. As she returned to her office, she found herself reflecting on Marcus's leadership. His ability to confront hard truths while inspiring positive change was unlike anything she had encountered before. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely motivated to grow, not just as a manager, but as a person. A surprise visitor. Later that afternoon, as Marcus reviewed proposals for the new training program in his temporary office, a knock at the door interrupted him. Looking up, he was surprised to see the older man from the previous day, the restaurant owner, standing in the doorway. "Mr. Harper," the man said with a warm smile, stepping inside. "I just wanted to stop by and thank you. Not just for how you handled things yesterday, but for the changes you're making. It's rare to see someone in your position take such a hands-on approach." Marcus rose from his desk, extending a hand. "Thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time to come back. Please call me Marcus." The man shook his hand firmly. "Name's Jim. I've been in the restaurant business for 30 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that a good leader sets the tone for everyone else. You're doing that here." Marcus smiled. "It's a work in progress, but I believe in this team. And I believe in leading by example." Jim nodded approvingly. "Well, if you ever need advice, or just a good meal, you know where to find me. Sunset Grill's always open." With that, Jim left, leaving Marcus with a renewed sense of purpose. Change wasn't easy, but it was possible. And at Elite Motors, it had just begun. The seeds of transformation. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus Harper's first day as the new owner of Elite Motors. In that time, the dealership had become a whirlwind of change. Marcus wasn't just transforming policies or procedures. He was reshaping the culture of the entire organization. His presence was felt in every corner of the dealership, from the showroom to the service bays, and even in the break room where employees now gathered for open discussions. But change, Marcus knew, was never easy. Beneath the surface of progress lingered tension, resistance, and old habits that refused to fade quietly. Catherine's redemption. Catherine Richards had taken Marcus's challenge to heart. In the weeks following their confrontation, she threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She began every morning by personally greeting each employee, something she had rarely done in the past. Her authoritative demeanor softened into something more approachable, though her sharp professionalism remained intact. She also started participating in the daily customer interaction debriefs Marcus had introduced. These sessions were designed to give the staff an opportunity to reflect on their interactions with customers and identify areas for improvement. For Catherine, these meetings became a mirror, forcing her to confront the biases she had previously dismissed as necessary instincts. One morning, Catherine sat with Daniel, the young sales associate who had borne the brunt of her earlier indifference. They were reviewing a sale he had recently made to a couple who had initially seemed hesitant about purchasing a luxury vehicle. "You handled that beautifully," Catherine said, her tone earnest. "You listened to their concerns and didn't push them. That's exactly the kind of experience we want to create." Daniel blinked, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks, Catherine," he said. "I've been trying to follow Mr. Harper's advice. Treat every customer like they're the most important person in the room." Catherine nodded, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "He's right, and we should all be doing the same." Marcus's vision in action. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to lead by example. He spent hours walking the showroom floor, engaging with employees and customers alike. His presence was a constant reminder that no task was too small for a leader. Whether it was answering questions about a car's specs or helping the cleaning crew straighten up the lobby, Marcus demonstrated the values he wanted his team to embody. One afternoon, Marcus noticed a young man standing near the entrance, looking out of place and slightly nervous. He was dressed in a fast food uniform, his name tag reading J. Marcus approached him with a friendly smile. "Hi there," Marcus said. "Welcome to Elite Motors. How can I help you today?" Jay hesitated, his gaze flickering to the rows of luxury vehicles. I was just looking," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't think I can afford anything here, but I've always wanted to see these cars up close." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you're in the right place. These cars are incredible machines. Come on, let me show you around." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus walked Jay through the showroom, explaining the features of each car and sharing stories about their design and engineering. By the time they finished, Jay's nervousness had melted into excitement. "Thanks for taking the time," Jay said, his smile wide. "This was amazing. Maybe someday I'll be able to afford one." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't wait for someday. Work hard, stay focused, and remember, you belong in places like this just as much as anyone else." Resistance and pushback. Not everyone at Elite Motors embraced the changes with open arms. A handful of employees resented the shift in focus, particularly those who had thrived in the old culture of exclusivity and high-pressure sales tactics. Among them was Ethan, a senior salesman known for his impressive sales numbers, but abrasive personality. Ethan confronted Marcus one afternoon in the break room, his tone laced with frustration. "Look, Mr. Harper," he began, "I get that you're trying to shake things up, but some of us have been doing this a long time. We know what works, and honestly, all this touchy-feely stuff about respect and inclusivity, it's slowing us down." Marcus regarded Ethan calmly, his expression unreadable. "Slowing us down how?" he asked. "We're wasting time on customers who aren't serious buyers," Ethan said bluntly. "I've spent years perfecting my approach, and it works. I don't see why we need to change everything just to coddle people who probably won't buy anything." Marcus let Ethan's words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "Ethan, I appreciate your perspective," he said. "But let me ask you this. How many of those non-serious buyers have you actually helped in the past month?" Ethan hesitated, caught off guard by the question. I don't know," he admitted. "And how many of them came back later or referred friends because of the way you treated them?" Marcus pressed. "Building relationships doesn't always lead to immediate sales, but it creates loyalty. And loyalty is what sustains a business." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unable to refute Marcus's point. "I guess I never thought about it that way," he muttered. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Change is hard," he said. "But if you're willing to adapt, I think you'll find that this new approach will make you an even better salesperson and a better leader for the team." The power of community. As the weeks passed, the changes at Elite Motors began to take root. Customers who had once felt intimidated by the dealership's exclusivity now spoke of its warm and welcoming atmosphere. Employees who had been wary of Marcus's vision found themselves inspired by his authenticity and dedication. One Friday evening, Marcus organized a team-building event at a local community center. It was a casual affair, with food trucks, games, and music. Employees brought their families, and for the first time, the barriers between roles and titles seemed to dissolve. Catherine stood near the snack table, chatting with Rosa and Daniel. She glanced across the room and saw Marcus talking animatedly with Jay, the young man in the fast food uniform who had visited the dealership weeks earlier. Jay was beaming, clearly comfortable in the presence of someone who had once seemed untouchable. "It's different now," Rosa said, following Catherine's gaze. "The whole place feels different. And it's because of him." Catherine nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's because he didn't just tell us what to do, she said. He showed us. A test of loyalty. As the evening wound down, Marcus gathered the team for a brief speech. Standing in the center of the room, he looked around at the faces of his employees, some still skeptical, but most filled with hope and determination. I want to thank all of you for embracing this journey, Marcus began. Change is never easy, but it's necessary. And what we're building here isn't just a dealership, it's a community, a place where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to succeed. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. We're not perfect, and we'll make mistakes along the way. But if we stay committed to our values, I believe we can create something truly extraordinary, and I'm proud to be on this journey with all of you. The room erupted into applause, the energy palpable. For the first time, Marcus felt the full weight of what they were building, not just a better dealership, but a better future. As he stepped down from the makeshift stage, Catherine approached him, her expression earnest. Marcus, she said, thank you for giving me the chance to be part of this. I won't let you down. Marcus smiled, his voice steady and warm. I know you won't, Catherine. This is just the beginning. Confronting the old guard, the transformation at Elite Motors was undeniable. But as with any significant change, resistance still lingered in the shadows. While many employees had embraced Marcus Harper's vision, a vocal minority clung to the old ways. For them, the dealership's prior culture, exclusive, high-pressure, and profit-driven at all costs, had been a source of personal success. To these holdouts, Marcus's emphasis on inclusivity and long-term relationships seemed like an unnecessary gamble. Leading this resistance was Ethan, the senior salesman, whose abrasive demeanor and impressive sales numbers had made him a mainstay at the dealership for years. Though he had listened to Marcus's philosophy and nodded along in meetings, his skepticism festered. He saw the changes as a threat to his dominance, a disruption to the methods he had spent years perfecting. For Ethan, it wasn't just about cars, it was about control. The breaking point. One Friday afternoon, the dealership was bustling. The showroom was alive with customers, employees flitting between conversations and test drives. The new energy that Marcus had cultivated was palpable, but it was about to be tested. A young woman in her mid-20s entered the dealership. She was dressed simply in a floral dress and sandals, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She carried a well-worn leather bag over her shoulder and looked around with wide eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the luxury on display. Ethan, standing near the reception desk, spotted her immediately. With a glance at her modest attire, he rolled his eyes and muttered to one of his colleagues, another window shopper. Watch this. He approached the woman with a forced smile. Welcome to Elite Motors, he said, his tone thinly veiled with condescension. Can I help you? The woman hesitated, her cheeks flushing. Hi, yes, she began. I'm interested in the new electric SUV. I've read great reviews, and I wanted to see it in person. Ethan raised an eyebrow, folding his arms across his chest. The electric SUV, he repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. That's one of our most exclusive models. Are you sure that's what you're looking for? We have some excellent pre-owned options you might want to consider. The woman's face fell, her confidence visibly shaken. No, I'm sure, she said, though her voice wavered. I've been saving for a while, and I think it's the right car for me. Ethan sighed, clearly unimpressed. Well, I'll see if someone's free to help you, he said dismissively before turning and walking away. From across the room, Marcus had witnessed the entire interaction. His jaw tightened as he saw the woman standing awkwardly by the door, her excitement replaced by uncertainty. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. Marcus steps in. Hi there, Marcus said warmly as he approached the young woman. Welcome to Elite Motors. I couldn't help but overhear you're interested in our electric SUV. The woman looked up, her nervous expression softening at Marcus's genuine smile. Yes, I am, she said, but I'm not sure if it's the right fit for me. Marcus nodded, understanding the unspoken doubts planted by Ethan's condescension. "Let's take a look together," he said. "I think you'll find it's an incredible vehicle. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them." Together, they walked toward the sleek electric SUV parked in the center of the showroom. Marcus explained its features with enthusiasm, highlighting its innovative technology and eco-friendly design. The woman's excitement slowly returned as she asked questions and shared her vision of owning a car that aligned with her values. Meanwhile, Ethan watched from the sidelines, his expression a mixture of annoyance and disdain. He muttered under his breath, "What a waste of time." The confrontation. After finishing the tour of the SUV, Marcus escorted the woman to a sales associate who could help her finalize the details of her inquiry. As she left with a grateful smile, Marcus turned his attention to Ethan. "Ethan," Marcus called, his tone calm but firm. "Can we talk?" Ethan hesitated, but the weight in Marcus's voice left no room for argument. They stepped into one of the empty offices, the door closing behind them. "What's on your mind, Mr. Harper?" Ethan asked, his tone laced with fox politeness. Marcus leaned against the desk, his arms crossed. "I want to talk about what just happened," he said evenly. "The way you treated that customer." Ethan shrugged, his demeanor defensive. "She wasn't serious. People like her come in all the time, wasting our time with questions they can't afford to act on." Marcus's gaze hardened. "And what makes you think she wasn't serious?" Ethan snorted. "Come on, Marcus. Did you see her? She didn't look like someone who can drop 6 figures on a car." Marcus's voice grew colder. "Ethan, this isn't the first time I've seen you make snap judgments about customers, and I need you to understand something. This dealership is no longer a place where we judge people based on their appearance. If someone walks through those doors, they deserve our respect and our attention. No exceptions." Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Look, I get it. You want us to be all warm and fuzzy. But at the end of the day, this is a business. We're here to sell cars, not babysit people who can't afford them." Marcus's expression remained calm, but his voice took on an unmistakable edge. "You're right, Ethan. This is a business. And businesses thrive on reputation, trust, and relationships. Every interaction we have with a customer reflects on us as a team, and on this dealership as a brand." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You might be able to close deals with your current approach, but you're driving away far more people than you realize. People talk, Ethan. They share their experiences. And if word gets out that Elite Motors treats people the way you just treated the customer, it won't matter how many cars you sell. This business will crumble." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, the truth of Marcus's words cutting through his defenses. "So what are you saying?" he muttered. "I'm saying it's time for you to decide," Marcus replied. "Either you adapt to the culture we're building here, or you step aside. Because I won't let anyone, no matter how successful, undermine what we're trying to achieve." A choice to make. The room fell silent, the weight of Marcus's ultimatum hanging heavy in the air. Ethan stared at the floor, his jaw tightening as he grappled with his options. Marcus didn't press him, allowing the silence to work its magic. Finally, Ethan looked up. "I'll think about it," he said grudgingly. Marcus nodded. "Take all the time you need," he said. "But remember, this isn't just about you. It's about the team, the customers, and the future of this dealership." As Ethan left the office, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Change was never easy, but he knew that even the most resistant individuals could be transformed with the right guidance. A surprise sale. Later that afternoon, Marcus received a call from Rosa, one of the sales associates. "Marcus," she said, her voice brimming with excitement, "you're not going to believe this. The young woman who was looking at the electric SUV, she just finalized her purchase. She paid in full." Marcus smiled, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had known from the start that the woman was serious about buying. But more importantly, her experience at Elite Motors had left her feeling valued. And that, to Marcus, was the real victory. As the paperwork was completed and the keys were handed over, Marcus watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. This was what he had envisioned for Elite Motors, a place where anyone, regardless of their background or appearance, could feel welcomed and respected. And as the young woman drove away in her new electric SUV, Marcus couldn't help but think that the road ahead, while challenging, was worth every step. The transformation is tested. Months had passed since Marcus Harper first set foot in Elite Motors as its unassuming new owner. The changes he had implemented were beginning to bear fruit. Customer reviews were glowing, sales were steady, and most importantly, the dealership had begun to shed its old reputation as an unwelcoming, judgmental space. Employees now worked with a sense of pride, many finding fulfillment in providing excellent service and forging genuine connections with clients. But as Marcus knew well, transformation was never linear. Just when progress felt certain, the old ways had a way of rearing their heads. The real test of a team wasn't how they performed under ideal circumstances, but how they responded to challenges. And an unexpected challenge was about to put Elite Motors' newfound culture to the test. A VIP arrival. It was a bright Saturday morning, and the showroom hummed with activity. Marcus was making his usual rounds, stopping to chat with customers and offering support to his team. He noticed Catherine across the room, calmly guiding a young couple through the features of a sports sedan. Her warmth and professionalism had become second nature, a far cry from the rigid demeanor she'd displayed months earlier. The glass doors slid open with a hiss, and a new presence entered the showroom, a presence that immediately shifted the energy in the room. A tall man in a sharp gray suit strode in, flanked by two assistants. He exuded an air of authority and wealth, his watch gleaming with the unmistakable shine of platinum. Employees exchanged glances, recognizing him immediately. Richard Weston, a powerful local real estate mogul and longtime client of Elite Motors. His purchases were always extravagant, and his demands were notorious. Catherine stepped forward to greet him, her confidence unwavering. "Mr. Weston," she said with a polished smile, extending her hand. "Welcome back to Elite Motors. How can we assist you today?" Richard ignored her hand, his gaze sweeping over the showroom with an air of disdain. "I need a new car," he said brusquely. "Something flashy, powerful. My last purchase here was adequate, but I'm expecting better this time." Marcus, watching from a distance, felt a pang of concern. Weston's tone carried more than just arrogance. It carried an unspoken test. Marcus had seen customers like him before, people who thrived on asserting dominance, challenging the patience of those around them. The old ways resurface. As Catherine began showing Weston a lineup of high-performance cars, his criticisms came fast and sharp. "This paint job is uninspired," he said, brushing his hand over a sleek sports coupe. "Do you even understand what premium looks like? This interior feels cheap," he sneered, stepping into a luxury SUV. "What are you people doing, cutting corners?" Despite his tone, Catherine maintained her professionalism, responding to his barbs with grace and knowledge. But Marcus noticed something troubling. A few employees had begun whispering amongst themselves, their expressions betraying unease. Weston's behavior was dredging up memories of how the old Elite Motors had catered to clients like him, no matter the cost to staff morale or dignity. Ethan, who had been keeping a low profile in recent weeks, suddenly stepped forward. Marcus watched as the senior salesman approached Weston, his demeanor overly eager. "Mr. Weston," Ethan said, his voice dripping with false charm, "it's been a while. Let me take over for Catherine. I know exactly what you're looking for." Marcus's jaw tightened. Ethan's words, though polite, carried an undertone that undermined Catherine's authority. Worse, his willingness to appease Weston at all costs felt like a return to the very culture Marcus had worked so hard to dismantle. Catherine hesitated for a moment before stepping back. Her expression remained neutral, but Marcus could see the flicker of frustration in her eyes. Ethan, emboldened, led Weston toward a limited-edition hypercar, launching into a spiral designed to flatter and impress. A customer pushes too far. As the tour continued, Weston's behavior grew increasingly abrasive. He barked orders at staff, interrupted explanations, and dismissed recommendations without a second thought. The breaking point came when he turned his attention back to Catherine, who had rejoined the group at Marcus's silent encouragement. "You," Weston said sharply, pointing at her, "fetch me a coffee. Black. No sugar." Catherine froze, her professionalism faltering for the first time. Around them, the showroom grew still. Employees and customers alike watched, tension crackling in the air. Before Catherine could respond, Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Mr. Weston," he said, his tone calm but firm, "our staff is here to assist you with selecting a vehicle, not to fetch coffee. If you'd like, I can show you to our lounge, where you'll find refreshments." Weston turned to Marcus, his eyes narrowing. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" he demanded. Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "I'm Marcus Harper, the owner of Elite Motors," he said evenly. "And while we value every customer, we also value our team. Respect goes both ways here. The culture holds." The silence that followed was deafening. Weston's assistants exchanged nervous glances, and for a moment, it seemed as though the mogul might explode. But then, something unexpected happened. He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Well," Weston said, his tone icy, "it seems this place has changed. Perhaps I've outgrown it." Without another word, he turned and walked out, his assistants scrambling to follow. The glass doors slid shut behind him, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Marcus turned to Catherine, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "I am," she said. "Thank you." Marcus addressed the rest of the team, his voice carrying through the showroom. "Let this be a reminder," he said. "We're not here to cater to egos. We're here to provide excellence, to our customers and to one another. If someone doesn't respect that, they're not the kind of client we need." Reflection and resolve. Later that evening, as the team gathered for their end-of-day debrief, the events of the day were the main topic of discussion. Ethan, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. "I've been holding on to the way things used to be because it worked for me. But today showed me that maybe those old ways weren't right." Marcus nodded, sensing the sincerity in Ethan's words. "Change is hard," he said, "but growth comes from challenges. And the fact that you're willing to reflect shows that you're capable of growing." Catherine added, "We're all learning, Ethan. And as long as we're moving forward together, we'll get where we need to go." A legacy of integrity. In the weeks that followed, Elite Motors solidified its transformation. Stories of the dealership's commitment to integrity spread, drawing in customers who valued respect and authenticity as much as luxury. Employees took pride in their work, knowing they were part of something meaningful. One afternoon, Marcus received a letter in the mail. It was from Weston. "Mr. Harper, I've given a lot of thought to our encounter. While I didn't appreciate being challenged at the time, I've come to respect what you're building. People like me need to hear no sometimes. Perhaps I'll return when I'm ready to embrace your values." It was unsigned, but the sentiment was clear. Marcus folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer, a small smile playing on his lips. The road had been difficult, but Elite Motors was thriving, not just as a business, but as a symbol of what could be achieved when values guided success. As he looked out over the bustling showroom, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey wasn't over, but they were moving forward, stronger than ever.